For the last 30 days, I have gone vegan right off the back of doing a 30-day vegetarian challenge. I didn't have meat for about 60 days, which was the longest I'd ever gone without eating meat. As a girl who, used to do her own beef jerky, whose brother had a farm and would slaughter animals and eat them same day, as a person who ate meat her whole life and was kind of defined by it, going 60 days without having meat was a huge change. But there were so many positives and I had a really great time doing it, and I cooked a lot of really great food. So I want to talk about how it impacted me budget-wise, health-wise, I have fibromyalgia, autism-wise, I'm autistic, and of course, the ethics around veganism and meat consumption. Since this is a philosophy channel, of course, we're going to have to talk about the ethics and morals, and of course, sometimes comment sections on these types of videos can be very controversial, so please keep it kind and compassionate, and remember that food is very personal, and yet we have to consider the impact we are making on each other because we live in a community. I want to start off with the basics. So like the budget. How did that go? How did I feel about it? I often hear that veganism is hard because of the cost, but I found it to be just as doable as a meat-centered diet. So I spend €50 a week. I live in Croatia. I'm married a Croatian. For those of you who don't know, but I'm from America, we spend individually €50 a week on our food consumption. And this, of course, takes into account calories and health. We want to be focused on meeting those, calorie goals, those health goals, especially since I'm chronically ill. We always want to make sure that we're eating well. Everything came out delicious, but I think that's because I know how to cook. I realized that because Croatia doesn't have a lot of options like vegan cheese and vegan burgers and vegan things, though there are places that have them, they weren't as accessible to me in my location. I realized that this, I think, is the discrepancy when people say veganism is expensive, because if I was in America and I was buying Beyond Meat and vegan cheese and all of these things, then I think my budget wouldn't be able to hold off that €50. I also think that because I can cook, for me, nothing really changed. I already was cooking my food. I'm a Syrian. My parents are immigrants. We were raised in a household that cooked constantly. Cooking is like my me time. I really love it. So vegan cooking was really easy and really great. The only issue that came up because of that inaccessibility to vegan products were things that maybe people don't think about as accessible or not accessible, like tofu. I ran out of tofu. Basically halfway through my experiment of doing my challenge, my local store ran out of tofu. And that became very frustrating. And even today, I really wanted tofu and I couldn't get any. And that was really frustrating, but I was able to find other ways to eat, right? I'm not dependent on tofu. I just think that if you think to yourself, oh, tofu is a staple and it's so easy and accessible, yes, in some places. But the fact that my local store doesn't have any, and the fact that I would have to take a bus ride to get tofu alone, like that's not cost effective. I'm not going to get on a bus and spend an hour doing a round trip just for tofu. I'm going to find different meals to make, different recipes. And there's always this like privileged conversation that comes about when we talk about the privilege of veganism.
I always get comments like, you're vegan, that's so privileged, that's so privileged. I'm like, yeah, am I missing something? Like, isn't the whole point of having any kind of privilege that you use it to do something positive?
Plant-based in particular is a diet for the privileged people who can choose to do so. I can choose to do it. You can choose to do it. If you are Mrs. Smith, working 2 minimum wage jobs, okay, in this country, trying to feed your kids, are you really going to be concerned with your pulses and making sure the supplements are right to actually feed your kids so they can have a vegan diet? No, you want to feed your kids.
And this is a philosophy channel, so stay with me here. I think introspection is a privilege in a sense, and it doesn't come from having money. It comes from having time, awareness, and curiosity. And I think veganism is a philosophy first and foremost. And to have the time to dissect this philosophy and read all the papers and watch the documentaries and read, that is a lot of energy going into this one subject matter while you still have to work and take your kids to school and do all these other things. And while the administration is burning down America, like a lot of things are really stressful for us to spend time reading about veganism as a philosophy. And yet, I really think the one thing I want to contribute to the world is, this philosophical perspective that the best thing you can do for yourself is to be introspective. Self-awareness is great, but without the introspection, right? We have to deconstruct our preconceived notions about right and wrong and what's good for us and the planet. So if you want to contribute good to the world, especially me, I think I owe it to myself to dig into veganism as a philosophy. And so that's what I did. And of course, as I was doing that, I was paying attention to the fact that I had the time to do it, that I could, because I work from home, read up on veganism, watch a bunch of podcasts.
Can we be tricked into going vegan?
Let's talk about that.
Hey, it's Mike here, and today a recent British survey found that 2/3 of British men would rather die 10 years earlier than they otherwise would, shave 10 years off their life, than give up meat.
The dietary guidelines make it clear that Americans should eat more fruits and vegetables.
The majority of African Americans are experiencing the worst health outcomes, right? Because of food apartheid in our communities. So if we are living in urban centers where most African Americans live in the United States, unless that area has been gentrified, you're gonna find fast food places, you're gonna find corner stores.
Here's the surprisingly Black history of veganism. If your only mental picture of veganism is white ladies and Lululemon knocking back shots of wheatgrass, then you're way off. In fact, you may be surprised to find out that this new veganism trend is actually not that new. And it's not all that white either. In fact, veganism can be traced back over 2,000 years to the ancient cultures in India, the Mediterranean basin, and, drumroll please, Africa. Now, when it comes to a lot of traditional Black American cuisine, you wouldn't be wrong to say that it features, well, a lot of meat. But this hasn't always been the case.
There's always been like this river of African Americans who've been pioneers in the vegan movement. Originally, there were plants and people were eating plants. I mean, that's the natural thing for us to eat. That's what we gravitated towards. That's what looked good to us. That's what our bodies were made to eat. So this is just nothing new.
But this vegan tradition changed when European adventurers, aka colonizers, introduced more commercial farming methods, which produced a lot more animals, but also fewer indigenous crops.
Foods we consumed in the Black community as soul food, it was the food that our ancestors were compelled to eat. All of the food that they had to find creative ways to make it tasteful for your palate so that you could stay alive.
While I embrace the term soul food, because to me that was the resilience of my ancestors, but it's processed grains and processed meats and those type of things that are now causing a lot of health problems.
More Black Americans are choosing plants. According to a Pew Research Center survey, 8% of African Americans identify as vegan or vegetarian, compared to just 3% of the general population. Many people of color say they switched to a plant-based diet for the environment, animal rights, and their health.
And so I took the golden rule, treat everybody how you want to be treated, and that goes to animals, bugs, humans.
I had a lot of uncles and aunties that just died from high blood pressure, diabetes.
And most doctors agree, a plant-based lifestyle can improve our health. So that's why many people are veganizing the foods they grew up on and love.
Really enjoy the process of being curious and learning. I think we take for granted that learning is the most privileged part of the vegan journey. And obviously this is an individual journey. So I'm really going to share, and I'm sharing my personal perspective. It's hard for me to make prescriptions for the world. I think prescriptions are kind of negative in a sense. The road to hell is paved in good intentions. And I don't want to hurt the world with my good intentions. Instead, I want to live by example. And I want to make sure that I'm living what I think is a good life. And if people think, oh, Brittany's doing this and it looks good for her, maybe I'll try it. That's great. I don't want to make a prescription to you. Instead, I just want to ask the questions and I want us to have the conversations. I know this subject matter makes people really, really defensive, and it really brings out the ugliness in people, vegan or meat eaters.
You're a vegan, right? I'm a meat eater. Why can't we just both live happily in each other's orbit? Why can't you let me just get on with eating meat and you eat your gruel and we'll all go home happy?
Because we know animal farming and fishing are a leading cause of the climate crisis.
And we know having a strictly vegan diet is bad for you as well.
Well, that's not true.
A lot of science says it's bad for you.
That's not true.
It is true.
Oh,
what do you eat?
I eat...
do you eat almonds? Do you drink almond milk? Eat almonds?
I think you're digressing from
I'm just asking a question.
The big issue
I'm just curious what you eat. Do you eat almonds?
I'm here to talk about the climate crisis.
Answer my question. Do you eat almonds or drink almond milk?
30 million people in Pakistan...
Do you drink almond milk?
...have been affected by severe floods.
Do you drink almond milk?
I drink plant-based milk.
You do. And do you eat avocados?
I eat a plant-based
Do
diet.
you eat avocado?
We're asking the government.
Do you eat avocado?
The reason this conversation with Piers Morgan is so frustrating is that he's not open or curious. He's trying to make an argument that almonds and avocados impact the planet negatively, and therefore meat farming is okay. But the reality is that industrial farming impacts the planet far greater than almonds and avocados. No one's trying to be perfect, but let's just look at some basic numbers as normal people who are not scientists or researchers. This is from the New York Times. The average American consumes more than 300 gallons of California water each week by eating food that was processed there. So as you scroll down this article, it says water guzzlers, avocados, almonds. This is what Piers Morgan is trying to make an argument about, that the almonds and avocados are really the reason that we are in a water drought, when in reality, it's not just a combination of these things, but it is the reality that livestock is the primary issue here because of what we need to fuel that livestock. These are just quick little diagrams we can use. It says June is National Dairy Month. This is from Farm Flavor. 50 gallons of water a day is consumed by a cow. And the question is, all that water that's going to those cows, those billions of cows, what else could we do with that water? Look, you don't have to agree that 1,000 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of cow's milk is worth it or not worth it to know that at least it's a high cost. And then the question becomes, well, if this is the high cost, is it worth it? For me personally, it's not worth it. And I've really enjoyed drinking nut milk. And I think there's a healthier, better way to produce it than focusing on producing dairy milk. And I just don't want us to be ugly because life is hard. But I think life sometimes is so hard that it can make you ugly. And so I just want us to be introspective, to be self-aware about our ugliness and try to be better. So that moves into the health perspective. So I want to talk about fibromyalgia and chronic health because I saw the most significant change in that regard. So over the last couple years, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I've been focusing on exercising and bringing my pain levels down. So fibromyalgia, was an unexpected diagnosis for me. I wasn't prepared to have it. I got diagnosed after I got COVID. I do think I'm also suffering from long COVID, though that hasn't been confirmed. And I think my body has been experiencing a unique sense of pain that I've never felt my whole life. And for the last couple years, it has been only managed through exercise, which is the common prescription that doctors make to you when you have fibromyalgia, is to work out. Now, of course, sometimes I'm not motivated to work out. Sometimes I lose my momentum. Sometimes I'm so stressed with other things that I don't always make it to the home gym. I work out at home with weights. Nothing fancy, but sometimes I can't do it, okay? Sometime in the middle of this process, about the third week in, I kind of slowed down my working out. And then it had been about 3-4 days since I had worked out, but I wasn't feeling that bad. Now, to make this clear to you, we got to transfer my screen over to this screen here. This is the screen I used for my streams. This is example of like pain levels with a face. This is a visual helping tool that I want to use for you guys to understand. So most days prior to being vegan or going vegan for this 30-day challenge, most days I'm a 4. Okay, so hurts a little bit more. I'm always in a constant state of fluctuating between a 4 and a 6, but usually a 4. I wake up and assume I'll be at a 4. That's usually my daily. Okay. Even when I'm exercising, I fluctuate between like a 4 and maybe a 2 sometimes, but usually like a 4 is my happy spot. Okay, so I've gotten used to the pain level. Like I've gotten used to it, right? Well, before I did this challenge, I would get some days all the way up to 10. And, that's the day I would skip stream, or those are the days I would just like completely crash on the couch. Those are the days when I would just wish my body would basically not exist because I was in so much pain, right? If you go and you look at my changes because of this vegan diet, I took dairy completely out of my diet. And I had been actually gluten-free as well because I had noticed that gluten was really hurting me. So here I am, gluten-free, dairy-free, and I stopped exercising. And for like a week, I hadn't exercised. And this is just a very long time. If I go a week without exercising, I'm usually at an 8 or a 10. And this is like not a decision I make lightly. I try very much never to get to a week. I usually can get up to 4 days before I start working out again, because that 8 or 9, 10, whatever, that will stop me from working. And I really love my job and I want to be here with you guys. So I try really never to get there, right? Because I don't want to do that to myself. Now that I've been during this journey vegan, I noticed I didn't hurt in the same way. And I was like, but I'm not exercising. What is so different? And I really think it's the vegan diet. I don't know if it's the dairy or the vegan part of it. I'm very confused. Since I stopped working out, which was a week and a half ago at least, maybe even a little bit longer, I have been at a solid 2. And it hurts a little bit. So I do, like right now, I feel a buzzing. I am in pain. I can feel it in my body. I am in pain, but it's very little. And this is kind of amazing because I have really been suffering, as you who suffer from chronic illness know, it's a lot. And it's a pain you can't explain to people, right? So the fact that my default without exercising on this vegan diet is a 2, and my default off a vegan diet, eating dairy, eating meat, is a 4. Kind of tells me, and a 4 with exercise tells me, informs me, there's an answer here. That for me and my body, there's an answer here. So I'm going to continue being off dairy. I'm going to continue focusing on the vegan diet. I'm going to continue doing those things, but with some caveats, which we'll get to after the ethics section. I would really recommend veganism, the vegan diet for at least a month. See how your pain levels go. At least if you're not going to go vegan, take out the dairy. When I was doing the vegetarian challenge before this, I was eating so much dairy. I wanted to eat as much dairy as possible, specifically cheeses, before I stopped because I thought I was going to miss it the most, which I did, by the way. I did miss cheese the most. And then I switched to nutritional yeast, which I use on everything now. Absolutely love it. I cannot believe I've been missing out on nutritional yeast all this time. It is so delicious. It is so good. And I know, and this is something maybe the vegans can answer in the comment sections, I know everyone tells you to make your own cashew cheese, but I can't ethically consume cashews. We just covered this on stream. Cashews are unethically sourced and in such a way that I can't justify it.
The perfect snack, healthy, rich in vitamins, suitable for vegetarians. Cashew nuts are in high demand, but at the other side of the world, this little nut has become a nightmare for thousands of women. India is the world's top cashew producer. Dozens of processing facilities in the region supply mostly European and American customers. To start, they use a machine to cut the nut in half. Their speed is impressive, and it has to be. They're paid by volume, just 4 to 6 euros per day. At a nearby cooperative, women also sort nuts by hand. They're self-employed and earn even less selling their products to wholesalers, 2 or 3 euros per day on average. Here, too, their hands are badly damaged by acids in the nuts.
These liquids we're constantly touching all day burn our fingers and turn them black.
They say gloves slow them down too much and quickly rip as well. Their problems aren't limited to the skin.
Our eyes burn. At night we feel feverish, so we can't sleep.
By the time they arrive on Western shelves, the cashews no longer contain dangerous acids. As importers here in Europe continue to demand lower prices and greater quantities to meet skyrocketing demand, groups are calling on supermarkets to ensure fair trade practices and calling on shoppers to seek out fair trade nuts. Because at the other end of the supply chain, it's these women who bear the consequences.
It's not a big deal for me not to eat cashews, but I notice a lot of vegans eat cashews, and I wonder how do they do that? Like, how do you ethically consume cashews so much? Why are all the vegan shops selling cashew cheese? Why is everyone bragging about cashew cheese? Like, it's so unethically sourced. So I'm a little confused. Like, maybe somebody can explain it in the comment sections. I just love everything about the way I feel. Oh, and one more part, which I know isn't the most important part, is aesthetically. It might not be obvious to anyone else, but I've been holding on to this like chub that I have been very concerned about and curious about. Like, why am I swelling? Why am I bloating? Well, taking out gluten helped with the bloating, but I was still swollen and I didn't know what was going on. And now that I've been off the dairy, I think it's gone away. Like, I feel really good. Even my partners notice, like, oh, you look different. I feel very just light. And it's hard to even want to go back to being swollen again, but I feel really, really good. And so I really recommend this from a chronic health perspective. Try it out, see if you like it, because it changed my life. In terms of health, one last thing that I learned recently that I didn't quite process until I saw a visual for it is that meat is a carcinogen, meaning it could or does contribute to cancer. So think about like cigarettes contributing to cancer. I didn't really process this. I know our communities are very meat heavy, but also our communities are dying. We have heart problems and high cholesterol and issues with so many things that at a certain point of your dad's life, usually his doctor will tell him to eat less red meat. I think we're there as a country. I just think it's interesting as a country, we're always talking about how unhealthy our food is, but we won't look at this thing that all of us are eating, this thing called meat. And as a person who wants to avoid cancer and Alzheimer's to the best of my ability, I think taking meat out of my diet helps contribute to that.
People just assume that Alzheimer's disease is a genetic disease, that if their parents or their grandparents had Alzheimer's disease, that they're bound to develop it. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Only 3% of cases have that kind of a genetic pattern where if they have the gene, they will develop it. In more than 90% of the cases, lifestyle is what pushes the manifestation of the disease.
With that said, I also think people have the right to live and die how they want. So if you want to smoke cigarettes and possibly get cancer, if you look at research data, people who've never smoked a day in their life get cancer. We need to be having conversations about where is the cancer coming from? Is it our meat? What is it? And so for me, I'm going to go with the science and the numbers.
By 2050, the world's population could approach 10 billion, and around 60% more food could be needed to feed everyone.
The environmental impacts of the food system are daunting. It's responsible for about a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions. It uses about 70% of all freshwater resources, and it occupies about 40% of the Earth's land surface. Food-related emissions could increase to 50% by 2050 and fill up the total emissions budget that we have in order to avoid dangerous levels of climate change.
Interest in vegan food has been booming across the rich world. A major study has put the diet to the test, analysing an imagined scenario in which the world goes vegan by 2050.
If everybody went vegan by 2050, we estimated that the food-related greenhouse gas emissions could be reduced by 3/4.
Cows are the biggest emission contributors. Bugs in their digestive system produce methane, and deforestation for their pasture releases carbon dioxide. These gases warm the planet. If cows were a country, they'd be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter.
Now, if new data comes out, I'll change again. And this is the thing that I think is specific about Brittany, is that I always change with new information. I only want good data. I want to move forward with good data. And sometimes we'll get bad data. Well, okay, when we get the good data, we'll change again. I'm all about that change. And I think that that's what I want to encourage you to do, if anything, is to be open to the change. I think sometimes we want to come to an answer and stick to the answer, and that's the only answer ever. But I'm never going to be that person. I just don't think humans are smart enough to actually discover an answer that is going to be true forever in the way that we currently implement that thinking. Let's talk about the autistic perspective. Autism is interesting. It's not a monolithic experience, so this is just my experience. There are categories of safe foods that usually neurodivergent autistic people seek out when they don't want to eat anything else. And I do have my list of safe foods, things like beef jerky, chicken wings, French fries, chicken nuggets, things like that I could eat basically all the time. So during this vegan experiment, I did have a 5-day week. Oh, that was a really heavy week where I just didn't want anything. And so I defaulted to French fries with a mustard sauce, which was vegan, really yummy, really delicious. I loved it. I really love potatoes, but I wasn't getting the nutritional benefits from just eating fries. So I was definitely like not the healthiest that week, which is okay. Better some food than no food, right? It wasn't my favorite, but I think that had I had my chicken wings, I still would have been in that same position in a way where I just would have eaten chicken wings with no vegetables. And what is missing from the American diet is vegetables.
When the federal dietary guidelines come out with their eat more messaging, they come out very clearly. Dietary guidelines say eat more fruits and vegetables. But what if you don't have access to fruits and vegetables?
5 miles away, you have Loma Linda. This population lives more than a decade longer and healthier than everyone else. Most of the population has access to healthy foods. Majority of them are vegetarians, and even when they're not, they eat meat sparingly. 2 areas, just 5 miles apart, and the biggest difference is food.
For me, as a lay person who's uneducated, who's trying her best to understand things, from my understanding, even when I was a meat eater, I was missing out on things realistically. There were things I could have done better, like eat more fruits or vegetables. My fiber intake was very low. And so now I am, TMI, having much better movements. My stool has been much better. Time in the restroom has been much better. I also take a daily magnesium. I've been taking B12. I take iron supplements, and all of that has been great. No big deal, accessible, easy to get. doable, right? But even when I was a meat eater, I know I was really lacking on a lot of things that I now have been sort of forced to incorporate into my food. And I will say one thing that this 30 days has given me was intentionality. I've been so intentional, right? I think it is funny when people say, oh, what do you eat on a vegan diet? Like, oh my gosh, you're gluten-free too. Don't you feel like that's so restrictive? Oh, I never understand this question. There are so many things you can eat while being vegan.
It's callaloo, ackee, sweet potato, yam, banana and tomato, cabbage, spinach, avocado, chocho, butterbean and cocoa, courgette, millet, plantain, rice and peas and pumpkin, mango, dates and guava, chickpeas and cassava, Brussels sprouts and cauliflower, onion, fennel and cucumber, plum, pear and papaya, aubergine and saya, lime, lentils and quinoa, wholemeal bread and wholemeal flour, watercress and okra, tofu and sweet pepper, couscous and carrot, broccoli and coconut, peaches, apples, apricot, breadfruit, jackfruit, soursop, pistachios, cashews and almond, walnut, peanut, also pecan, sesame seeds, sunflower, lemon, orange, pineapple, and melon, bogle, wheat and garlic, hijiki and rocket, popcho and pomegranate, kiwi, corn and turnip, berries, cherries and strawberries, beetroot, grape. See, there's a lot of foods you can eat, and all of them got different vitamins, different minerals, which are really good for your body, and if you eat a well-balanced vegan diet, you don't need anything more,
So sometimes when I hear critics say that, it just gets like really confusing because I didn't run out of options for food to eat, even if sometimes my brain just didn't want to eat anything. That's just what I'm going to chalk up to neurodivergency, right? Now let's get into the ethics of it all. So morals are for you personal and ethics are societal standards. I do have to explain to you my belief system about the world. Brittany's, not anybody else's. I believe we're evolved animals on a planet. I do not believe like humans are inherently more important than animals. I think we are all just existing together in this ecosystem. I think we evolved. I believe in dinosaurs. I believe in, basically what the science assumes is our best theory of creation. I don't believe in a God. I don't believe in angels or demons. I am open to whatever is true based off evidence, but I'm not interested in holding a lot of beliefs that have like very little evidence. So I think the problem with these conversations is if you talk to a religious person, they might say we have dominion over animals and that's why we get to eat them. But that's not my perspective. My perspective is actually the animal perspective, that we're all just animals and we're non-human animals and human animals and we exist together. And I personally don't think, I'm more important than my cat who's currently sleeping, on her little bed right here to the left of me. Like, I'm not more important than her. And at the same time, I think as an animal species that believes in preserving my species, I obviously want to prioritize human health above animal health, but not at the expense of animal health. And I think this is really important. I always want to benefit others, but not at the expense of others. And so I try really hard to find that balance. I would never make the prescription for perfection personally. So I am never aiming for perfection. I'm only aiming to be less bad. In some way, having a child, having a baby, birthing something into existence causes suffering. And so in some ways, just existing is inherently suffering. So you have to bring down the bad rather than keep doing good. I think a lot of people try to be very good. And by being very good, you actually end up being very bad because they don't like to think of themselves as being bad. And that usually is because of the story we tell ourselves. So people say like, I couldn't be a bad person. Look at all this good I do. But I think of it more as, how do I mitigate the harm? How do I harm reduce? So again, I believe that as a human, I want to protect human life, but not at the expense of animal life, non-human animal life. But at the same time, I want to make sure there's a balance of understanding. So I'll give some examples and you guys can answer in the comment sections down below what comes to mind when I say this. As an example of a scenario, if the building is on fire and I have to save my cat, Indiana, or a neighbor I don't know, I'm going to save my cat because I know her and I have a connection to her and we're bonded and we've been together over, a decade plus. Like, she is my companion. She is our third roommate. She is important to our family, and her life is not less important than my neighbor's. I don't know my neighbor. I'm sure they're a nice person. I hope their family gets out safe. But like, their life isn't more important than my cat's, right? Just because she's a cat. Now, if we're in a scenario, a car is speeding down a highway and it's going to hit a baby or a cat, who will I save? Like, I'm going to save the baby, right? I'm not going to prioritize the cat. One, I don't know either of them, so I'm going to choose the human because I'm a human. But also, they're both strangers to me, so I kind of doesn't really matter which one I pick. But I do think as a human, I should protect human life, right? They get a priority, but not because they're better than non-human animals. It's just that makes more sense to me to protect humans and hopefully not at the expense of animals, though in that scenario, an animal has to be the one who gets hit. So I understand. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it clear to you that I don't choose animals over humans. I choose situationally which animal over which human. I don't think you can say, oh, we only have to protect non-human animals and we only have to protect humans. It feels a little bit silly to say something like that when most of us would agree that we'd maybe run into a burning building for our dogs. Why, if they're not so important? Well, because we have a bond with them. Another scenario that comes to mind, which I think is a quandary for vegans and me alike, is survivability. Like, what does it mean to survive in the world? What does it mean to exist? I think we are in one of the most gluttonous stages of human civilization. I think we are incredibly vain and narcissistic, and it's not technically a fault of our own. I think we're biological creatures evolved over time. I could reference Robert Sapolsky's Determined in this regard, where I do think there is a science to this idea of a lack of free will. But I would argue, and this is my philosophy, the levels linked down below in the description, I believe you can have a more introspective relationship with that biological experience. So we do not transcend biology. We simply exist within it on levels. And most people are operating on what I call a 2 level. And they're not bad people inherently, but I think humans are inherently like negative in the sense that they are an animal species that is very destructive. They seem to be inherently very destructive as a species. Like right now, a lot of animals facing extinction are because of us. The environment, global warming, climate change, all of these things are heavily impacted by our doing.
What will cause the extinction of life on the planet next time? Volcanoes erupting, asteroid impacts, sunspots, or developing fatal diseases in a lab? Well, here's what we know from history. There have been 5 past mass extinctions, and everyone was caused by a climate crisis. The last, a climate crisis caused by an asteroid impact. We are experiencing a 6th extinction right now. We're not quite at the levels, obviously, that happened when the dinosaurs were wiped out, but the rate of extinction that's happening right now, if it persists, will cause Earth's 6th extinction time ago. Sharks were around a couple 100 million years before the dinosaurs. They persisted through the entire reign of the dinosaurs. They survived the mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs, and obviously they exist today. But you know what they're having trouble with? Us. There's a lot of sharks that are critically endangered right now because they're being overfished and because their environments are being destroyed, such as the great hammerhead shark, which is endangered. And they are the apex predators in many of the ecosystems in which they live. And predators are important. It keeps actually the prey populations healthy because it winnows out the ones that are diseased, that could spread those diseases through the population. It causes natural selection, which causes the prey species to become faster, stronger, quicker. And so we really need sharks.
And so when we look at the world and we look at us as a species, I think we can say objectively in some sense that humans are destructive. Even though we build great things, it's usually at the expense of someone else, like the 70 billion animals we eat a year through factory farming, right? The standards and practices of factory farming are abhorrent.
The way the system works is they own the birds, they own the feed, they own the medications and all that stuff. What I actually owned was the land and the buildings. And you're gonna see a sea of white from wall to wall. I just think the bird is bred to suffer. They didn't ask me to do anything cruel. Didn't have to. And they're crawling all over each other and they're scratching each other and opening up wounds. Bam, enter bacteria, you had issues.
If one animal gets sick, it spreads throughout these warehouses really quickly. So they use antibiotics in a prophylactic way to prevent diseases from happening.
More antibiotics are fed to farm animals than are used in all of human medicine just to promote growth and prevent disease in such a stressful, unhygienic environment.
One of the side effects of giving animals low levels of antibiotics is that they become a breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
They now have strong evidence of a dangerous strain of E. coli that is now highly resistant to antibiotic treatment.
At least 2 million Americans get antibiotic-resistant infections each year, with 23,000 deaths.
We are continuing to barrel towards a future where a cut on your hand or an infection from a routine dental procedure could prove to be deadly. because there's very little that we can do to treat that infection.
And that's human created. So I can't really say with a full chest that humans are these great things when we're so good at destroying things. And not to mention, when we talk about the value of animal life, we're barely comprehending the value of human life. There's a genocide happening right in front of us in Palestine, and people don't care. So, realistically, there is a conversation to be had about, do humans value any life at the end of the day? Now, here's a scenario that I think is difficult to answer if I was to call myself a vegan. So my brothers and I talk about this all the time because we all have like companions, non-human animal companions, and we love them. And I always ask, like, okay, if you're stuck in the snow and you're going to be dying, or you're in a desert and you're going to be dying, like, do you eat your animal? Do you eat your companion? And a lot of my siblings and I are all say no. We're like, nah, we'll die with them, if anything. Like, we're not going to eat that animal. I wouldn't eat my cat. I wouldn't eat Indiana Jones. Don't think it would be worth it. I think it would be more worth it for her and I to die together, if anything. But I think that's because she is my companion, right? But another animal, maybe a fish or maybe something I could catch, I would eat that animal. I don't have a connection to that animal. I would be fine eating that animal. Does that make me not vegan? Are vegans in survival situations allowed to eat animals? And if they're not allowed to eat animals, how does that make sense if we're biological creatures evolved over time and we're animals sort of consuming animals? I know we want to give humans this great credit of being like these intellectual beings that are so great and we're so much wiser, but like we're obviously not. Statistics show we're struggling with Nazism again, and racism is just always here. I don't know why we give ourselves so much credit in being these great wise creatures when we're struggling so hard. We can't even get people not to cheat on their spouses or not to hurt their own children. So I don't know why we view human beings as these like great intellectual people. And I think meat eaters and vegans run into that same problem. Another survival situation that I think a vegan argument could counter my argument with is, well, what if you're with a group of humans? Do you get to kill them to survive? And I would say no. I would say you can't kill other humans in a survival situation in order to eat them and survive. I would say that would be unethical, immoral. And there are scenarios which there's a famous football team that got trapped in the mountains. Their plane crashed and they lived in the snow. And after their teammates passed away, they would eat their bodies, which in that scenario, I would say is ethical and moral. And it makes great sense to survive at that point with your dead companion's bodies, not to kill your companion in order to eat, because that would be horrible, but instead to kill, like to accept that after they have died, they are consumable. And so that's sort of where I come from, where I can see each scenario allowing a different opportunity, which is how I view most of life. I don't take a lot of black and white stances. I tried to take a situational stance. What would I do? What's the most ethical thing to do? I think everything in my life is the trolley problem, where every time I'm in a scenario, it's a trolley problem. Even having coffee that's labeled vegan could be considered a trolley problem. Is this ethically sourced coffee? What does it mean to be ethically sourced? Some people say there's no such thing as ethically sourced coffee. These are questions I had to ask myself through this process, and I'm still deconstructing. And yes, along this journey, I didn't just look at my food, but I looked at my nail polish, hair, shampoo, conditioner, moisturizer, face wash. All of them were already vegan, so I didn't have to change much. My nail polish is vegan. Everything I put on my face is vegan. And so that was really easy for me. But I didn't even do that before becoming vegan for these 30 days. The products I was already buying just happened to be vegan. So it's kind of like a win-win. Though I will say as a teenager, I did start paying attention to shampoos and conditioners, and I tried really hard not to buy things that are tested on animals, which of course plays into a much bigger role or conversation in regards to animal testing and science and cures for human illnesses. And so there's something to be said about the way humans do things and the way that we make decisions about who gets to suffer on whose behalf.
I don't mind like vegan or not. I think everyone should be able to do what they can. But I don't like it when we make it about intelligence or not. It's like, no. Wow. So we're saying like dumb things deserve to be killed.
So there's a famous philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, in the late 18th century, who already made the point. It's not about how smart animals are. It's not about can they talk, can they reason. It's about can they suffer.
I like that.
That's the essential point. There was a recent scientific committee who published this big report about when you cook crabs alive, well, they suffer immensely, right? I think that matters. Look, I'm not fundamentally against eating meat. Not at all. What I'm against is factory farming. And I think it's really important to acknowledge as a consumer in the world today is that, 98% of all meat comes from factory farms. So if you say, well, I'm radically going to cut down the amount of meat I eat, I'm just going to eat meat that was hunted or something like that, or that was really raised in an ethical way. I mean, that's fine. But then please also acknowledge that you will have to eat 5% as much or something.
I think something that comes into play that gets very confusing for all of us is if everything's a mess and nothing matters and everything we do is harm, why try? Because we're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to harm reduce. The dilemma with humans is we create narratives and stories that argue for perfection in ways that have never been displayed. So there is this myth we tell ourselves, whether we're vegan or meat eaters, that allows us to think there is a level of perfection that's accessible. And I just don't think that's true. I think we can only ever harm reduce. I don't think we can ever be perfect. Whether you think God made you perfect or you can be perfect in action, I don't think there is such a thing, which is again going to play into my idea about labeling people vegan. Apparently, according to some vegan bubbles, it's very strict who gets to be vegan.
People just need to understand that some vegan people, including me, I'm vegan for 10 years, eat cheese sometimes.
No, we don't.
If no one's around and a tree falls in the forest and it doesn't make a noise.
Stop. Veganism is not performative. It does not require a witness.
Well, if you're vegan and you eat cheese at 12 p.m. and no one's around, are you still vegan? Just don't let anyone tell you that you aren't vegan.
I'm telling you, you are not vegan. You're like lacto-vegetarian or something. And it's still better than nothing at all, but I just want to be clear to the world, veganism is veganism. No animals, no exceptions. That's just the way we like it.
And if it's that strict, I'm going to say it seems probably improbable that it is the objective answer for 8 billion people. I am looking for solutions for humanity that are within reason of our nature, not outside of it. And I think sometimes, whether you're vegan or meat eater, there's a belief that we can transcend nature, and that's not true. I've seen arguments from meat eaters saying veganism is so unnatural. And vegans saying, well, if it's so unnatural, you should stop using your cell phone and doing all these other things. But see, Brittany, I think we're much like the beaver. And when we make the dam, that is nature. The tornado who rips through your town, that's nature. We are the tornado. We are the asteroid. We are the beaver. I don't consider anything that we create not nature, because without nature, none of these things would exist. We are in this ecosystem. And so for me, everything that I see, everything that we create is a part of our nature, whether it's destructive or not destructive. So it's kind of interesting that whether you're vegan or a meat eater, there's this element of transcending nature. How do you transcend your nature when you only ever know yourself through that nature? And this is the quandary that I think upsets people, because they like to think they're better than their nature. But I don't think that's true. I think human beings are destructive by nature. We work together through nature. We build because of our nature. We, create because of our nature. But destroying violence, non-consensual actions, that is also our nature. That's why I say on this channel, humans are going to human, because there's this belief that humans have convinced themselves of that they are somehow not humaning. Oh, I'm not like these monsters over here. I'm a different kind of human. You're the same thing. That person over there that's horrible, that's doing this horrible thing that you're like, I would never do that. You're the same. This audacity of thinking you are different only comes through action. And that action, I do think, causes a difference in categorization, but not fundamental truth. You are a human. That's just the truth. When we transcend that sort of relationship with nature, I think there's a scale. And I think as I, research more into the construct of enlightenment, because it is a construct, this idea of being one with nature, the positive symbiosis we can have with it, I think there is an argument that maybe a more, quote, enlightened person would be vegan. And I think that's interesting, because I created a spectrum of introspection, not quite based off enlightenment exactly. That's probably the wrong way to look at my levels, but instead the relationship you have with yourself in relation to existing and in relation to everything outside of yourself, existence. So when I think about myself and I think about having a positive symbiosis with nature itself, with other things outside of myself, I think of how to harm reduce and how to make peace and build bridges. But I also think of how to put down hard lines when it comes to violence you might face. So self-defense is a huge part of where I'm confused about veganism as well. Can you be a vegan if you kill an animal in self-defense? Right? I'm a little confused about the rules here. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that I'm like pro-human in the sense that I would never kill a human. I would kill a human in self-defense, but I'm also pretty anti-killing things in general. I think we should stop killing as much as we do, but not eradicate it completely, because there are opportunities in which killing things could make sense. Having abortions, people who are chronically ill or want assisted suicide, I think, are valid. I think there are situations with self-defense in which it makes sense. I think eating animals has a place in the universe. I just think that the way we do things is wrong. I saw this TikTok of a woman who, basically said, food grows on trees and water falls from the sky and somehow we ruined it. And basically, this is because of our nature. I think human beings move within their nature. We do destroy things. You would think, as a species who thinks it's so smart and so evolved and so enlightened, it would figure out that nature itself provides everything that we need and we don't actually need to kill or be destructive. But because it is within our nature to do so, this is the result. I think all of humanity is a reflection of us as a whole. I don't think any one individual is responsible, but I do think every individual contributes to the way that the world is now, myself included. So I am not exempt from the world being a reflection of us as a whole. The state of the world that exhausts you and feels just impossible to get better and makes you so sad and angry, that's you. The world is a reflection of us as a whole. And I think vegans have a very good argument, not exactly about this, but that coincides with it, which is, why do we unnecessarily cause suffering? So now we have to talk about mitigating suffering.
Veganism, they think it's like they don't eat animals. And the fact is, veganism to me, it's about love and respecting sentient beings, to just understand like they want to live. And so part of it is, if you can develop in your heart the compassion for living beings, then we wouldn't be so quick to go to war.
And suffering is something I'm deeply interested in. I think we should suffer wisely, but I think humanity suffers so unwisely. I think we suffer unwisely at least 90%. I do. I think 90% of your life is unwise suffering and like 10% is wise suffering. There's always going to be suffering in life. If you move away from the violent and graphic imagery of factory farming, you might think of milking a dairy cow as something compassionate. But when you learn what it takes to milk a dairy cow, you realize that it's actually quite cruel. But look how it's framed in this video as something wholesome and loving, when in reality, we're forcing impregnation constantly with no reprieve just for the benefit of dairy milk that should have gone to a calf.
Let's discover how cows make milk. A cow starts to produce milk once her first calf is born. This usually happens when a cow is around 2 years old. Like humans, a cow is pregnant with her calf for 9 months and can only make milk after giving birth to a calf. Farmers then milk the cows to produce milk for us too. The first milk a cow makes is very important for her calf, as it contains antibodies to help the calf avoid diseases. This milk is called colostrum. Cows are usually milked at the same time twice a day, and on most farms, they are milked in the morning and then again in the afternoon. Generally, each cow is milked for 10 months of the year and then takes a 2-month break before they have their next calf.
Right? But there doesn't need to be this amount of unnecessary suffering. And so that's a very good argument from the vegans. Why do I need to eat meat if I don't need to eat meat?
This chicken is clearly in a bad way, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's the worst bit about it. I feel so sorry for this little animal that's been born into this world just to have a fate like this. Just laying on the floor in distress, pain, confusion, no mother, no understanding as to why they are here. They're just here. What a short life to just live and die.
Just suffering to death.
To death. I'm literally watching this guy just slowly die in front of my eyes. If this was any other animal, we'd be taking this animal to the vet instantly. We'd be paying money to get this animal back to a good state again. Yet, here I am, witnessing this animal die in front of my eyes.
what is the desire I have to cause that unnecessary suffering? So this brings me back to this question I had for the vegans. In a survival situation, I would consider it necessary suffering to eat an animal in order to survive. But in a privileged society, and this is where privilege plays in, where I have access to fruits and vegetables and pastas and things that aren't animal, right? Then that begs the question, why am I eating an animal if I don't have to? Right? I think there's something here. There's some conversation here that's important. Now, I do want to answer some questions that I think I saw along my journey here. I just want to throw these ideas out with you that I did see and I thought was interesting. One of the things that came up along this thinking was a question from certain vegan communities about eating flesh. Like, oh, how can you eat flesh? Why are you eating flesh? I think because we're animals. I don't ask the lion why he eats flesh. I eat it for the same reason. Genuinely, that's a belief I have. I think humans eat flesh for the same reason the lion does or the bear does, right? I think animals have a level of consciousness. I think they can be more aware and self-aware than other animals. Same with humans. I think like my cat is I call her like a human cat, but she's really just like a non-human animal with a consciousness that I think is like very much interacting with me on a daily basis. Versus I see some animals that aren't as interactive. And I think this coincides with two specific thoughts. One, this actually works in the religious sense towards the vegan argument. When I think of Adam and Eve and being raised Catholic, and I think about the Garden of Eden, and I think about this paradise God created, he gave Adam dominion over animals, but I don't remember any scripture about him eating those animals. I just remember them eating from the fruits, the trees, right? I don't remember him eating animals. Until they got kicked out of the garden, then they experienced pain, nudity, shame, birthing, eating, sacrificing animals. And it kind of begs the question, and I've heard some theories that Jesus might have been vegan himself, whatever that means. Why do Christians eat meat? Do they only eat it as a form of sin outside the garden? Or is there a meat eating had in the garden? I'm a little confused there. Now, minus the Christians, the other thought I have that kind of coincides with this idea of consciousness and sentience, which is an argument I hear from vegans that a little bit confuses me. I don't think I value sentience as much as I value quality of life. And I think there's an argument to be had here. But do you guys remember Timothy Treadwell? Timothy was a person who believed that grizzly bears could understand him, and he spent many summers in Alaska kind of proving that point. But then he died because one of the grizzly bears ate him and his girlfriend. But I want to talk about this because I actually agree with Timothy's premise that animals have enough consciousness. Some animals, same with humans, right, have a level of consciousness that allows them to understand you.
She's about, I'd say, 10 feet from me to the camera. Hi, Cracker. Hi, Cracker. The bear right next to me is Cracker, and she's enjoying a fish right now. I love you. That's my friend. I'm out in the prime cut of the Big Green. Behind me is Ed and Rowdy, members of an up-and-coming sub-adult gang. They're challenging everything, including me. Goes with the territory. If I show weakness, if I retreat, I may be hurt, I may be killed. I must hold my own if I'm going to stay within this land. For once there is weakness, they will exploit it, they will take me out, they will decapitate me, they will chop me into bits and pieces. One of the key role players in this year's expedition, the bear's name is the Grinch. The Grinch has come on to be one of the more frequent bears here, and she has kind of an aggressive attitude. If I turn around too much, she'll bite me. It's okay. Hi, how are you? Don't you do that. Don't you do that. Back off. Don't do it. It's okay. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. We patrol the Grizzly Sanctuary together. How did we meet? Over a decade ago. He left his mother and father's side, promptly peed on my shoes, pooped on my clothes. That was it. He was my friend, Timmy the Fox. I think one of the things that's really important is you can see the bond that has developed between this very wild animal and this fairly wild person.
And I do think if you watch that documentary series about his life, it's pretty clear that the bears he was interacting with pretty frequently did understand him, had a communication with him, and had a relationship with him. But the bear who killed him, kind of dead in the eyes. Kind of what I call an animal brain versus a human animal brain. And though humans are animals, this is just the way my language works to help me categorize people and animals differently and specific to their consciousness. I do believe my cat understands me. I do believe when I see other cats, they're not getting me. I feel like they're too animal brain. I think this happens with all of us because I do believe we're animals. So I don't mean this to be derogatory. I mean this to be matter of fact that animal life, all animal life on a spectrum has a spectrum of consciousness. And I think we're discovering that animals can judge us. They see us. They fix themselves with medical care.
Deep in the Indonesian rainforest, a small step for a wild orangutan and a giant leap for our understanding of how alike we are to non-human primates. That's where researchers say Rakis, a male orangutan in his 30s, was injured in a fight back in 2022. The team documenting this quarter-sized wound under his right eye and another in his mouth. Dr. Isabella Laumer, a behavioral biologist and one of the study's lead researchers, says they followed the orangutan to observe what he would do and were astounded to see him chewing the leaves of the liana plant.
So it's quite rare that they eat from it.
Known to local humans for its pain-relieving properties. The researchers' findings published this week in the journal Scientific did not end there. They then spotted Rakis using the plant to make a paste from the crushed leaves and sap and applying it to his facial injury, marking the first time an animal has been seen using medicine to treat a skin wound. This discovery adds to growing research suggesting animals may self-medicate with varying degrees of sophistication.
They form families and tribes. They have languages. I mean, we're learning so much about animals and non-human animals that I think we're going to realize in decades to come that they're not that different from us. And I think that that's going to be hard for us to process, but I think it is going to, I think the data will show that. And so that for me allows me to have a much better understanding of veganism now through a philosophical lens, to have a better understanding that this animal creature that is non-human is having a very similar relationship to self that I am, but yet it's different. And I do think it's different. And this is where we kind of butt heads with the vegans and the meat eaters. I don't feel entitled to animal flesh. I don't feel entitled to humans or their spaces or their lands. I don't even feel entitled to existing, if I'm going to be honest. I just think that I do exist. And I think I am a human. And I think I evolved to consume the things around me. And I just want to do it with more harm reduction in mind. I don't think I'm special. And I don't think any of us are. I think we're just simply here, but we create myth around our uniqueness. God made us in his image. We're special. We're intellectual. We're so high IQ. We're so special. But I don't believe any of that. I don't think our IQ makes us special. I don't think God made us special. I don't think anything about us is special. But I do think we're specific. And specific isn't special. We're just specific. So we're having a specific relationship with our biological evolution that allowed us at this point to have the thought, hey, what if I don't eat animals? And that is pretty cool. But it also brings into another debate that I was learning about on this journey of veganism that I think really sets into place the struggle people are going to have with eating animals and not eating animals. And that's the Pokemon dilemma. The Pokemon dilemma is whether or not you would eat a Pokemon if Pokemon were real.
Do people in the Pokemon world eat Pokemon? What would the tastiest Pokemon be if they ate Pokemon? And here's the thing, friends, both of those questions have been answered. Yeah, people eat Pokemon. The franchise doesn't even try to hide that fact. Like Appleton, the evolved form of Applin, whose Pokedex entry literally says that children will eat it as a snack.
Appleton. Its body is covered in sweet nectar, and the skin on its back is especially yummy. Children used to have it as a snack.
And then there's Farfetch'd, a Pokemon that was apparently so delicious it was hunted to the point of extinction. Slowpoke's tail is considered to be a delicacy. Shuckle eats berries that mix with its body fluids to become a delicious juice.
And I think the conversation around eating Pokemon is actually probably a better one to have in relation to eating meat. Would you eat a Pokemon, yes or no? Honestly, I feel like I would eat a Magikarp. I feel like I would eat a lot of the Pokemon, but none of the Pokemon at the same time. Like, there are just certain types of Pokemon that I would definitely not want to eat. But then I could kind of see myself eating some of the Pokemon. And then maybe I would see myself eventually not eating any of the Pokemon. And when I asked family and friends, would you eat a Pokemon or not? They kind of give similar answers, where some of them were like, oh, no, not at all. And some of them were like, maybe certain Pokemon over not other Pokemon. Same with animals. Like, we eat certain animals, but not other animals. And I think the conversation is meant to help us have better conversations, answer better questions, deconstruct. I'm not sitting here making a prescription. I'm just saying, oh, that's a really good question. Would I eat a Pokemon? I think I might, but I don't know that I would seek it out. And the fact that we seek out animal consumption is interesting, but also not surprising considering the meat industry is really good at marketing, considering that we sort of take for granted living in modern times and having meat so accessible to us. I used to believe I could never enjoy a full meal and feel satisfied without meat being at the center of my food until I did this challenge and I realized like, oh, I don't need meat at the center of my meals. And it really helps me feel like I'm minimizing suffering by not seeking out factory farmed animals at this point. Factory farmed animals are experiencing the most suffering, so unnecessary. It is so unwise, the amount of suffering they're experiencing.
To discuss how these chickens are killed, we need to understand the language that the animal agriculture industry uses. Processing is the term used to describe turning living animals into meat. Stunning refers to rendering animals unconscious before they are killed. Slaughterhouses use two main processes to kill chickens: electric stunning and gas chamber stunning. Electric stunning begins with the chickens arriving at the slaughterhouse packed in transport crates. Shackling is painful and stressful for the birds. Chickens' hips can be dislocated and their legs broken as they are shoved into the shackles. The conveyor then carries the chickens towards a shallow water bath that has been electrified. As their heads are dragged through the water, they are electrocuted and rendered unconscious. The conveyor then moves the unconscious chickens to an automatic cutter, which slits their throats. The chickens bleed to death while shackled on the conveyor. Finally, their bodies are immersed into a tank of scalding water to loosen their feathers. The carcasses then go on to be fully processed. However, things can and do go wrong. Some chickens are only paralyzed by the electric current, leaving them conscious and able to feel pain. Others lift their head above the electrified bath and are not stunned at all. These birds are then fully conscious as their throats are slit by the automatic cutter. It is also possible for the auto cutter to miss, leaving birds alive. A worker stands by with a knife to manually slit the throats of any birds who have survived, but the system is not perfect, and some birds are immersed in the scalding water tank while fully conscious.
And so again, for me, I can sit here and think, okay, well, I already know how to cook. I can eat vegetarian, I can eat vegan, I can do this pretty easily. Why aren't I doing it? What part of me is still open to eating meat? And I think it's the part of me that knows that if I was in a survival situation, I would. It's the part of me that knows, one, it tastes delicious, but also it's a part of me that doesn't feel like it's quite immoral, so much as the situation can make it unethical, like factory farming. I also think it's something I'm going to have to dive into and really dissect in myself as I move forward. I also, and this is really hard, I think to process, I also don't value existing the same way other humans do. I value the quality of our existence. And I do think the quality of existence for factory farmed animals right now is just so unethical. It's just without question. I also think the quality of life that humans are having globally is out of the question unethical. The way we sit here and feel so comfortable knowing there's a genocide, the way we sit here and watch the Trump administration target trans people, the way we just openly are allowing Nazism to become a trend again, like we as a species are incredibly violent and destructive. And sometimes that violence is justified, like an abortion, right? And sometimes the violence isn't justified. But I try to ask myself, where would I be if I was basically in a positive, symbiotic, joyful situation? And I think I'd be in a situation where I was having more harmony with life outside of myself, more harmony with the universe. But I also think a part of me has to radically accept that in 100 years, they could also find out that plants are sentient. I remember I was nannying this baby because I used to be a professional nanny before I was a full-time YouTuber. And he went around, he was kicking the flowers. And I said, hold up. You can't kick flowers. I said, they're living, they exist. They're like living beings. You can't kick flowers. Okay. You can pick a flower and you can hand it to me and be dignified about it, but you can't kick them. It wasn't that the killing the flowers was unethical or immoral. It was the way that he destructively chose to kill them. And I do think there's a difference. I know a lot of vegans don't like it. They don't like the idea that there's a dignified way to kill things, but I think there is. Same thing with pro-lifers. They don't think it's dignified to have an abortion. I think you can have a dignified abortion. Same with pro-lifers. They don't think it's dignified to have assisted suicide. I think you can be dignified in wanting to die. If you can live how you want, you should be able to die how you want. But I think all of us are just pushing and pulling our own ideas against each other, and we're really struggling to accept that we're just like an evolved species on a planet, and all of us trying to be perfect is never going to happen. But I think you can get close by being curious and open-minded. I think you can get to the point where you can suffer wisely, where you can be a little bit more cognizant of people's pain and try to mitigate it, where you can mitigate your own. But I don't think we're there yet as a species. I don't think we're in that part of evolution. I don't think we're in that part of society, right? And so I know, as a person who works on herself on a daily basis, I know how imperfect I am. So I would never want the world to be perfect. And one thing that I learned while researching all of this is that veganism itself isn't monolithic. So the dilemma with making the prescription of veganism on everybody is that you don't know what kind of vegan you're going to be. I mean, there were some vegans during the BLM protests. It was very confusing. Who are basically saying they don't have time to focus on Black lives because they have to focus on animal lives.
I mean, the reality is there's always atrocities. There's constant suffering in the world. That's why all of us do what we do. That's why those of us who are promoting a cause, that's why we do that. How do you pick and choose? Why do vegans have to talk about Black Lives Matter right now, but we don't have to talk about Muslims in China? We don't have to talk about Syria. We don't have to talk about Venezuela. We don't have to talk about Bolsonaro. Holy crap. I mean, I don't understand. Is it because it's the US and the US is just the world? I mean, I hope that's not it, right? I don't think anyone has a good answer for that. It's just that this is a big thing going on right now. It's totally, I mean, it's hard to even get news about the coronavirus, even though, hey, guys, there's still a pandemic if you forgot.
Yeah, I think there's something there that doesn't quite sit well with me. And I think that's because at the end of the day, I do think human lives are more important than animal lives. And I think you can focus on both. I think choosing to focus on animal life over Black lives in a state in which the government is targeting them, and you know what, like that feels very icky to me. And I think that person got a proper amount of backlash, you know, when that whole controversy was happening. And again, I think that's the dilemma we're going to face is I don't want to pick or choose non-human life or human life over the other. I want us to learn how to be in symbiosis, positive symbiosis. I want us to learn to mitigate suffering and amplify joy. I want us to be healthy. And I think that's going to look different for all of us, but I think there is a direction we can head into. Now, part of this is you sort of have to believe in climate change and the sanctity of animal life and the wanting human life to have a better state of being. Like, I think the problem we're going to face for this whole discussion is I don't think humans are at a place right now where they care enough about suffering. I think they pretend to. I think they do. I think it's really hard for us to care about suffering. And I think it's because it kind of makes you crazy realizing no matter what you do, things will suffer. And so what people do is they panic and then they just implode and they double down. I would say radically accepting that everything is suffering allows you to be less bad versus trying to be more good. I don't need you to be more good. I just need you to be less bad. And I think that would help the world much more than trying to be more good, right? So with that said, how am I going to practice being less bad? So being less bad, to me personally, you don't have to do this. I'm not making a prescription. I'm just letting you know what I'm doing since I'm pretty transparent with my audience. For the next whatever long, because I realized by the end of the 30 days, I did start to feel very trapped in the fact that I had to keep doing it versus letting it flow naturally from my own desires. So I'm not going to put a time limit, like a day limit or the next 6 months, the next year limit on my consumption of animal goods. Instead, I'm going to say from now on and until I change my mind, because I'm allowed to change my mind, and not necessarily meaning going back or forth, just I'm allowed to change the construct I've created, okay? Because I think life is a construct. I will, and I wrote it down, not be buying flesh products for myself, right? I think that's really important. So bye-bye chicken wings. I miss you already. Bye-bye bacon. Bye-bye all the things I used to buy. Because I think at this point it's unnecessary considering they're factory farmed animals. If I could guarantee they weren't factory farm, if I could guarantee the animal died as quickly as possible, if I could guarantee they were, healthy, then maybe, but at this point I can't guarantee it. So I'm just going to avoid it for now. One of the caveats to this is that I won't be buying flesh, but I will not technically be avoiding consuming it. So if my partner makes himself a dish and he wants me to taste it, I'll taste it. If my neighbors bring me food as a surprise and they're like, oh, Brittany, I made you food, I'm going to eat it because that's just what the vibe is. I'm not going to let that food go to waste. If I am rarely in a situation where I want like a cheesecake or something, I might eat a cheesecake, right? I'm not going to be that strict about it, but I am going to make an effort to not gorge, to not focus in. I mean, if you looked at my calendar of what I used to eat, so before I was vegan, I had meat every day, guaranteed. Meat every single day, guaranteed. Then I went vegan and I had no meat, okay? And then one technical day, I did accidentally eat a gluten-free chocolate bar and it had dairy in it, and I was mortified, but it was delicious, and I have no regrets, but also I did not intend to eat it, but I did. Now, if you go to Brittany now, it will look more like no meat, right? Except for tasting on occasion, probably my partner's food, in which my partner also will not purposely encourage me to eat their food. My partner understands and respects my position. They're not going to, eat this meat or our marriage is over. Like, that's not what we're doing, right? So on occasion, I might taste their food to be like, oh yeah, that's good. Like, that does taste good, right? They're on their own journey. I have no requirements of my partner doing what I'm doing in this regard, because as a couple, we already have a base for what our values are and we're on the same page. So anything we do extra is just an A+, because again, we're looking to be less bad, right? We're not looking to be more good. I think this is really important. Okay. So we're on the same page there. And then I will not order meat from restaurants. This includes all animals. And I know there's some controversy in the vegan community about this, whether or not like clams are sentient or certain kind of sea life is sentient. At the end of the day, like I said, I would not be surprised if they tell me plants are sentient in the next 100 years. So I'm less concerned with sentience and I'm more concerned with being less bad. Okay. No dairy products, milk, cheese, but I can't promise that I won't have a cake, like I said, or a cheesecake, croissant on occasion. But those aren't things I have normally. Those are very rare treats for me. So I'm not too worried about it. I won't buy butter and I won't buy eggs. Also have switched from honey, which I used to have every day, to maple syrup. So the idea is I'm going to literally take anything that's directly factory farmed and avoid it as much as possible, if not totally, and then focus on enjoying food the way that I've been enjoying it the last 60 days of meat-free, nutritional yeast, pastas, nuts, lentils, like so many variations of greens. And I've eaten so many good things the last 60 days. I'm not concerned with quality of food, but I am excited to contribute less suffering to the world. And so this vegan journey has been amazing and exciting and wonderful. And I'm so happy that I did it. And I really think you should do it too, just for funsies, just to see how you feel. It made me so intentional and thoughtful. I definitely want to continue being that thoughtful with my consumption. So with all of this said, what a great journey it's been. I love it. I think you should do it. I think you should try it. And I think I will continue deconstructing what it means to consume animal and animal products. And I look forward to the future in which human beings as a collective work to be less bad instead of more good. All right, guys, I'll see you for the next one. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.
My head in real life, I'm in bed. My belly's being fed, and I'm okay. I'm just fine, yet all I do is whine. Not to you in my mind, cause I know I don't make sense. I've been nothing but blessed. So why's my life a mess? Please tell me, cause I'm sick of thinking. Yeah, I'm sick of reaching out for the truth and living life as a fool. Done.